There is a moment, usually late at night, when everything goes quiet and a man is left alone with his thoughts. And in that silence, he feels it, the pressure, the doubt, the question that lingers beneath confidence, beneath routine, beneath even desire itself. Am I enough when it truly matters? And what if the answer is hidden not in loud solutions or quick fixes, but in something slow, intentional, almost sacred? Something as simple as what you do with your body before the world falls asleep and your guard finally comes down. Because the truth is, most men are not struggling with performance the way they think they are. They are struggling with disconnection from their own bodies, from their own rhythm, from the quiet signals that build or destroy intimacy long before any physical moment even begins. And what if the real transformation doesn't start in the bedroom at all, but in the stillness of the night, where a routine becomes more than a habit? It becomes a conversation with yourself, a reclaiming of control, a rebuilding of confidence from the inside out. And this is where the idea of a nighttime oil routine quietly changes everything, not as some magic trick, not as some exaggerated promise, but as a deeply grounded, almost meditative practice that reconnects sensation, awareness, and emotional presence in a way that modern life has slowly stripped away. Because when you think about it, the modern man is constantly overstimulated mentally and under-connected physically, always thinking, rarely feeling, always consuming, rarely tuning inward, and intimacy suffers not because of lack of desire, but because of lack of presence. And presence is something that cannot be forced in the moment. It has to be cultivated when no one is watching, when there is no pressure to perform, when the body is allowed to relax instead of prove itself. And this is where something as simple as applying oil at night becomes something much deeper. Because the act itself slows you down. It forces attention. It invites awareness into areas of the body that are often ignored or only associated with expectation and performance, rather than care and connection. And over time, this changes the way a man experiences himself. Not just physically, but emotionally. Because when you start to treat your body with intention instead of urgency, something shifts internally. The anxiety softens, the need to prove begins to fade, and what replaces it is a quieter, stronger sense of confidence that doesn't come from external validation, but from internal familiarity, from knowing your own body in a way that most people never take the time to explore. And that familiarity becomes the foundation of real performance. Not the kind that is measured in unrealistic standards or comparisons, but the kind that is felt deeply by both partners, where connection replaces pressure and awareness replaces insecurity. And this is why the nighttime aspect matters so much. Because night is when the nervous system begins to slow, when the body transitions out of survival mode and into restoration. And anything you do in that window has a deeper imprint. It's not rushed, it's not distracted, it's absorbed. And when that routine involves touch, warmth, and intentional breathing, it becomes more than physical. It becomes neurological. It starts to rewire the way your body responds to stress, to anticipation, to intimacy itself. Because performance issues are rarely just physical. They are often the result of tension, of overthinking, of a nervous system that never fully relaxes, even in moments that are supposed to feel natural and connected. And what this routine does, if practiced consistently, is teach the body how to return to a state of calm while still being present, how to feel without rushing, how to respond instead of react, And that has a direct impact on endurance, sensitivity, and control, not in a forced way, but in a natural, organic progression that builds over time. And there is also something else happening beneath the surface, something that most men never consider, which is the relationship between self-care and self-worth. Because when you take time every night to care for your body in a deliberate way, you are sending a message to yourself that you are worth that time, that your experience matters, that your presence in intimacy is not just about giving or proving, but about being fully there. And that shift alone changes everything. Because a man who feels worthy of connection approaches intimacy differently than a man who feels like he has to earn it. And that difference is felt in every interaction, in every touch, in every moment of closeness. And it creates a dynamic where intimacy becomes less about performance and more about shared experience, where both partners feel seen, felt, and understood. And this is where the true power of a nighttime oil routine reveals itself, not as a superficial trick, but as a foundational practice that strengthens the connection between mind, body, and emotion, creating a level of presence that cannot be faked or rushed. And over time, this presence becomes your natural state, something you carry into every intimate moment without effort, because it has been built slowly, patiently, night after night, in the quiet moments where real transformation always begins. And once that transformation starts, it doesn't just stay in one area of your life. It expands. It influences the way you communicate, the way you connect, the way you understand your partner's needs without words. Because when you are deeply connected to your own body, you become more attuned to others, more responsive, more intuitive. And that is what creates intimacy that feels alive, not mechanical, not pressured, but real. And it all begins with something that seems almost too simple to matter. A few minutes at night, a conscious touch, a decision to slow down instead of rush. And in that decision lies the beginning of a completely different experience of yourself and your relationships. One that most people never discover because they are always searching for answers outside themselves, instead of building them quietly within. And as this idea settles in, you begin to realize that what you do in private shapes what you experience in connection. And that realization is where everything starts to change. Because now you are no longer waiting for confidence to appear. You are creating it deliberately, one night at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of awareness that slowly builds into something unshakable, something deeply rooted, something that no external pressure can easily disrupt. And that is the kind of transformation that lasts, the kind that doesn't fade with time or circumstance, because it was never dependent on them in the first place. It was built from within, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the moments where most people choose distraction, but you chose connection instead. And that choice, repeated consistently, becomes the difference between uncertainty and presence, between tension and control, between simply going through the motions and truly experiencing intimacy in a way that feels grounded, confident, and deeply fulfilling. And as this awareness deepens, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold inside you, because what once felt like a routine slowly becomes a ritual, and what once felt like effort begins to feel like return, a return to a version of yourself that is not rushed, not distracted, not carrying the invisible weight of expectation into every moment of closeness. And this is where the transformation becomes undeniable. because you start to notice that your body responds differently. Not just at night, not just in isolation, but in the presence of another person, where your breathing is calmer, your movements are more intentional, and your mind is no longer racing ahead trying to control outcomes. Instead, it is grounded in the present, responding naturally, intuitively, almost effortlessly. And this shift is not accidental. It is the direct result of those quiet nighttime moments where you taught your body a different language, a language of patience instead of urgency, of awareness instead of pressure. And over time, that language becomes your default, something you don't have to think about, something that simply is. And when that happens, intimacy stops feeling like something you have to perform and starts feeling like something you experience fully, deeply, without resistance, without fear of falling short, because that fear has been replaced by familiarity, by a sense of knowing yourself in a way that most men never take the time to develop. And there is a certain power in that knowing, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself, that doesn't rely on external validation, because it is rooted in direct experience. In the countless nights where you chose to connect with your body instead of ignore it, where you chose to slow down instead of distract yourself. And that consistency builds something far more valuable than any quick fix ever could. It builds trust. Trust in your body, trust in your responses, trust in your ability to stay present even when emotions rise, even when vulnerability enters the space. Because intimacy at its core is not just physical, it is emotional exposure. It is the willingness to be seen without defenses. And that can be uncomfortable for many men who have spent years disconnecting from their own feelings, from their own physical awareness. But this is where the routine does something unexpected. It begins to bridge that gap. Because when you spend time each night in a state of calm awareness, you are not just connecting with your body, you are becoming more comfortable with stillness, with feeling, with being present without distraction. And that comfort translates directly into your relationships, where you are no longer avoiding closeness or rushing through it, but actually allowing it to unfold naturally. And this creates a completely different dynamic, one where your partner can feel your presence in a way that goes beyond physical touch, where there is a sense of safety, of attentiveness, of genuine connection that cannot be faked or forced. And that is what makes intimacy truly powerful. Not just the physical act itself, but the emotional resonance that comes with it. The feeling of being fully engaged, fully present, fully there. And this is something that cannot be achieved through shortcuts. It requires a level of internal alignment that is built gradually, intentionally. And that is exactly what this nighttime practice cultivates, layer by layer, night after night, until it becomes a part of who you are rather than something you do. And as it becomes integrated into your identity, you begin to notice changes that extend beyond intimacy. Your overall stress levels decrease. Your sleep improves. Your mind feels clearer. Because you have created a space in your day where everything slows down, where your nervous system is allowed to reset instead of remaining in a constant state of tension. And that reset has a ripple effect across every aspect of your life, including your ability to connect, to communicate, to be present, not just physically but emotionally. And this is where the deeper insight reveals itself, that what you thought was a physical issue was often rooted in something much more complex, a combination of mental overload, emotional disconnection, and a lack of intentional self-awareness. And by addressing those layers through something as simple as a consistent nighttime routine, you begin to resolve the root rather than just the symptom. And that is why the results feel so different, so lasting, so grounded, because they are not dependent on external factors. They are built from within, through repetition, through awareness, through a willingness to engage with yourself in a way that most people avoid. And there is something quietly transformative about that willingness, because it sets you apart, not in a competitive sense, but in a deeply personal one, where you are no longer operating on autopilot, no longer disconnected from your own experience, but actively participating in it, shaping it, refining it. And that level of engagement changes everything, especially when it comes to intimacy, because now you are not just reacting to the moment, you are creating it, guiding it, experiencing it with a level of depth that was not available to you before. And that depth is what makes the difference between something that feels routine and something that feels meaningful, something that leaves a lasting impression rather than a fleeting one. And as this becomes your new normal, you begin to understand that true performance is not about intensity or duration alone. It is about presence, about connection, about the ability to stay fully engaged from beginning to end without being pulled away by doubt or distraction. And that ability is built in the quiet, in the stillness, in the moments where you are alone with yourself and you choose to be aware instead of absent. And that choice, repeated consistently, becomes the foundation of everything that follows, shaping not just how you experience intimacy, but how you experience yourself within it. And that is where the real transformation lies, not in becoming someone different, but in becoming more connected to who you already are, more grounded, more aware, more present. And that presence is what ultimately creates the kind of experience that both you and your partner can feel. Something authentic, something unforced, something that goes beyond expectation and into something much deeper, something that lingers, something that resonates long after the moment itself has passed, because it was real, because it was grounded, because it came from a place of genuine connection rather than performance. And once you experience that difference, there is no going back, because you realize that everything you were searching for externally was always something you could build internally, slowly, patiently, one night at a time, until it becomes a part of you in a way that feels natural, effortless, and deeply fulfilling. And once you reach this stage, where the practice is no longer something you remind yourself to do, but something your body almost asks for, something your mind begins to crave, not out of habit, but out of recognition of how it makes you feel, everything starts to align in a way that is both subtle and undeniable. Because now you are no longer approaching intimacy from a place of uncertainty or hidden tension. You are entering it from a place of calm authority over your own experience. And that changes the entire atmosphere between you and your partner, because energy is felt long before anything else happens. And when your energy is grounded, attentive, and present, it invites a deeper level of openness from the other person. It creates a space where connection can expand naturally instead of being forced or rushed. And this is where intimacy transforms into something far more meaningful than most people ever allow themselves to experience. Because it is no longer about reaching a specific outcome. It is about the journey itself. the exchange of attention, the rhythm of two people becoming attuned to each other without the noise of expectation interfering. And that attunement is what creates moments that feel unforgettable. Not because they were intense in a superficial way, but because they were deeply connected, fully experienced, and emotionally real. And that kind of experience is built long before the moment arrives. It is built in the quiet nights where you chose to understand your own body, to calm your own mind, to create a relationship with yourself that is based on awareness instead of avoidance, and that relationship becomes the foundation for every other connection in your life, especially the most intimate ones, because you cannot offer presence to someone else if you do not first cultivate it within yourself. And this is where the true lesson reveals itself. That performance is not something you chase. It is something that emerges naturally when everything else is aligned, when your mind is not distracted, when your body is not tense, when your emotions are not suppressed or ignored, but integrated into your experience in a way that feels natural and balanced. And the nighttime oil routine, simple as it may seem, becomes a gateway into that alignment, a consistent reminder that slowing down is not weakness, that taking time to connect with yourself is not unnecessary, that in fact it is the very thing that allows everything else to function at its highest level. And as you continue this practice, you begin to notice that your confidence is no longer fragile. It is not something that fluctuates based on circumstances or outcomes. It is steady, grounded, because it is built on something real, something you have experienced repeatedly in your own body. And that kind of confidence carries into every aspect of your life, into the way you speak, the way you move, the way you engage with others. Because it is not performative, it is authentic. It comes from a place of internal stability rather than external validation. And that authenticity is what people respond to most, especially in intimate relationships, where true connection depends on the ability to be present without pretense, to engage without fear, to allow moments to unfold without trying to control them. And this is where everything comes full circle. Because what began as a simple idea, a quiet routine at night, has evolved into a complete shift in how you experience yourself and your relationships. A shift from tension to ease, from doubt to trust, from disconnection to deep, grounded presence. And that shift is not something that fades with time. It strengthens, it deepens, because it is reinforced every night you return to that practice. Every night you choose awareness over distraction, connection over avoidance. And in that consistency lies the real power, the kind that cannot be taken away, the kind that becomes a part of who you are, shaping your experiences in a way that feels natural and effortless. And when you reflect on the journey, you begin to understand that the most important changes were never about dramatic breakthroughs or instant results. They were about the small, intentional choices made consistently over time, the willingness to engage with yourself honestly, patiently, without judgment. And that willingness is what created everything that followed, because it opened the door to a level of awareness that most people never access, a level where you are no longer disconnected from your own experience, but fully immersed in it, fully present, fully alive within each moment. And that presence is what transforms intimacy from something routine into something meaningful. Something that resonates on both a physical and emotional level, creating connections that feel genuine, lasting, and deeply fulfilling. And in the end, that is what most people are truly searching for. Not just better performance, but deeper connection. Not just fleeting moments, but experiences that leave an imprint, that create a sense of closeness that goes beyond the surface. And the path to that experience is not complicated. It does not require extreme measures or unrealistic expectations. It requires something much simpler and much more powerful: the decision to slow down, to pay attention, to build a relationship with yourself that is grounded in awareness and care. And from that foundation, everything else naturally evolves. Because when you are connected to yourself, you become capable of connecting with others in a way that feels effortless, authentic, and deeply satisfying. And that is the true conclusion of this journey, that what you do in the quiet moments of your life shapes the depth of the connections you experience in the shared moments, that the way you treat your own body influences the way you show up for intimacy, and that by choosing to cultivate awareness, patience, and presence within yourself, you create the conditions for a completely different experience of connection. One that is not defined by pressure or expectation, but by authenticity, depth, and genuine fulfillment. And once you step into that experience, once you feel the difference it creates, you begin to realize that this was never just about a routine. It was about rediscovering a part of yourself that had been overlooked, reconnecting with a level of presence that had been lost. And in doing so, transforming not just how you perform, but how you experience intimacy as a whole, in a way that is lasting, meaningful, and profoundly real.